Social exclusion. Being accepted and liked by others serves several vital needs for humans. It gives them a sense of belonging and connectedness, helps them to maintain feelings of self-worth, and provides them with a sense of control over their social relationships. The experience of being rejected by another person or being excluded from a social group threatens these vital needs and is a powerful source of negative affect that may lead to aggressive behavior. Several overlapping terms are used in research that addresses the impact of the experience of not belonging on aggressive behavior. Ostracism refers to ignoring and excluding individuals or groups by other individuals or groups. Rejection involves an explicit declaration that an individual or group is not wanted, and social exclusion describes the experience of being kept apart from others. Although each of these constructs emphasizes somewhat different aspects, they share the common core of describing experiences that undermine a person's need for social approval and connectedness. Therefore, they will be treated as synonyms for the purposes of the present discussion. A large body of research has shown that social exclusion results in feelings of sadness and anger, even when it comes from complete strangers, members of disliked groups, or an apparently randomized computer sequence. Williams and Walberton, 2003, described ostracism as a form of indirect aggression that often elicits aggressive responses, directed either against the excluding agents or against third parties. A widely used paradigm for studying social exclusion under controlled conditions in the laboratory is the cyberball game, a virtual ball tossing game in which a person is excluded from the tossing exchanges of two or more other players. Williams, 1997. Another experimental strategy for studying the effects of social exclusion is the life alone paradigm, developed by Twenge et al. 2001. Participants are provided with false feedback about the projected development of their social relationships in the future. In the social exclusion condition, they are informed that based on alleged personality test scores, they will most probably end up being alone for the greater part of their future life. For example, the text of the feedback provided by Twenge et al. 2001 reads as follows: "You're the type who will end up alone later in life. You may have friends and relationships now, but by your mid-20s, most of these will have drifted away. You may even marry or have several marriages, but these are likely to be short-lived and not continue into your 30s. Relationships don't last, and when you're past the age where people are constantly forming new relationships, the odds are you'll end up being alone more and more." The paradigm also includes a social inclusion condition, which provides feedback about successful relationships in the future, and a negative comparison condition, unrelated to social relationships, in which participants are told that they are particularly likely to be accident-prone in the future. Of course, participants are carefully debriefed at the end of the experimental session to make sure that they realize the feedback was fabricated. Twenge et al. 2001 showed that participants in the social exclusion group behaved significantly more aggressively towards an experimenter, in the form of giving negative feedback relevant to his job promotion prospects, who had insulted them previously, than did participants in the social inclusion or the accident proneness conditions. As a further method, Leary et al. 1995 designed a get-acquainted paradigm to manipulate social rejection. After a brief group discussion to enable them to get acquainted, participants are asked to name two group members with whom they would like to work on the experimental task. Manipulated feedback is then provided to participants about the choices of the other group members. In the social rejection condition, they are told that no one has chosen them to work with. In the social inclusion condition, they learn that everyone wants to work with them. The validity of the measure was demonstrated by the finding that participants' self-esteem was significantly reduced when they thought they had been rejected by the other group members. Leary et al. 1995. Each of the three paradigms has generated conclusive evidence about the negative effects of social exclusion on self-esteem and feelings of control. Williams, 2007. The experience of social exclusion has been described as a feeling of social pain that is no less intense than the feeling of physical pain, and brain imaging studies have revealed that being rejected in a cyberball game activated the same areas of the brain as the infliction of physical pain. Eisenberger et al., 2003. There are at least two common ways of reacting to this aversive experience. One is to try to restore social inclusion through ingratiation and behaving in a socially desirable way. Another is to engage in aggressive behavior, fueled by the experience of anger about the rejection. Williams, 2007, reviewed a large body of evidence demonstrating that socially excluded participants are more likely to engage in aggressive behavior across a range of measures of aggression discussed in Chapter 1, such as the noise blast paradigm or the hot sauce paradigm. In explaining the effects of social exclusion, Williams proposed a two-stage process. The first, immediate response, is seen as a reflexive, automatic experience of social pain experienced as a result of the exclusion. The second stage involves a more systematic appraisal and reflection of the experience. The reflexive response is largely unaffected by individual differences or contextual variables in the situation, and is followed by feelings of anger, sadness, and helplessness. A meta-analysis of 192 studies by Blackhart et al., 2009, found significantly less positive affect in rejected participants than in accepted or control participants, although the effect was relatively small. The reflexive automatic effects on self-esteem are illustrated by the fact that information which should have lessened the impact of perceived exclusion is not taken into consideration at this stage. In a study by Zadro et al., 2004, using the cyberball paradigm, participants were either included, i.e. received about a third of all tosses in a three-player situation, or excluded, i.e. received no further tosses after the first two rounds. Half of the participants in the inclusion and exclusion conditions were told that they played the game with other human players, and the other half were told that they played against a computer which was programmed to toss at random. The impact of these manipulations on participant self-esteem immediately after 6 minutes of playing the game is presented in Figure 5.3. As expected, when they thought they played with other human participants, the excluded participants responded significantly lower self-esteem than the included participants. The effect was equally strong among participants who thought that the tossing sequence was determined by a computer, indicating that they had failed to consider this information. With time to reflect on the exclusion episode, a second reflective process sets in that involves a more controlled cognitive appraisal. As shown in a series of experiments by DeWall et al., 2009, rejected individuals generated more hostile thoughts, which in turn predicted more aggressive behavioral responses. This second phase of responding to social exclusion is influenced by stable dispositions and the features of the situation. For example, Twenge and Campbell, 2003, showed that narcissists, whose self-esteem is inflated and particularly vulnerable to threat, were more aggressive after rejection than non-narcissists. For a discussion of narcissism and aggression, see Chapter 4. Similarly, a study by Adjuk et al., 2008, found that individuals high in rejection sensitivity, who anxiously expect and readily perceive social rejection, showed more aggressive behavior following social rejection in a laboratory situation than those low in rejection sensitivity. Situational variables have also been identified as moderators of the rejection-aggression link, arguing that social rejection undermines an individual's sense of control and that aggression is a means of regaining control. Walberton et al., 2006, conducted an experiment in which participants were either excluded or included. Subsequently, they were exposed to an aversive noise blast that they could either terminate or could not control. Their findings showed that excluded participants who were given situational control over the aversive noise were not more aggressive in the hot sauce paradigm than participants in the inclusion condition. By contrast, excluded participants who were denied situational control over the aversive noise assigned 4 times more hot sauce to the target person than any of the other groups. The critical role of control has also been demonstrated in a study by Wesselman et al., 2010. They showed that participants responded more aggressively to the experience of rejection when it occurred unexpectedly than when they had seen it coming on the basis of the experimenter's previous behavior. Figure 5.3. Effects of social exclusion in a cyberball game on self-esteem, depending on whether tosses were thought to be determined by human players or a computer program. So the y-axis is measuring mean self-esteem from 5 to 7.5, and the two categories on the x-axis are human players and computer, and they're side-by-side bar graphs, so it's showing inclusion and exclusion as well. So you can see when people were in either the human player or the computer condition of who they were playing against, they responded with the same levels of self-esteem depending on whether they were included or excluded. So they had higher self-esteem if they were included in both conditions and lower self-esteem if they were excluded in both conditions, even if they thought they were playing against a computer. Although the present discussion has focused on single episodes of social exclusion as a situational trigger of aggressive behavior, it is of course important to consider the effects of continuous and cumulative experiences of social exclusion over time. Many recent school shootings and also workplace killings were committed by individuals enraged by the experience of rejection in the form of being bullied at school or dismissed from their jobs. Leary et al., 2003. Similarly, social rejection by parents and/or peers in childhood has been linked to individual differences in aggression later in life, e.g. Hale et al., 2008. Taken together, the evidence discussed in this section suggests that the experience of social exclusion is both a short-term and a long-term risk factor for aggressive behavior. A final question in relation to the adverse effects of social exclusion on aggression refers to differences in the association as a function of culture. Based on the distinction between individualistic cultures, where individual autonomy is highly valued, and collectivistic cultures, where individuals define themselves through their social relationships, two competing hypotheses may be advanced. The first is that individuals in collectivistic cultures might be more negatively affected by social rejection because they have an interdependent self-concept that is mainly defined by good relationships with others. The second is that individuals in individualistic cultures should be more negatively affected because they have fewer social bonds that can potentially buffer the impact of social rejection. The review by Uskall and Over 2017 provides more conclusive evidence for the second hypothesis, arguing that entertaining an interdependent self-concept may serve a protective function against experiences of social exclusion.